Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a pretty radical idea, one that sort of flips conventional leadership wisdom on its head. We're drawing from some really insightful material, all centered on this concept of surrender.
Right.
And we're not talking about, admitting defeat. We're talking about this counterintuitive idea that real leadership authority is found not in seizing control, but in deliberately yielding it.
That is such a crucial distinction to make right up front. I mean, the materials we dove into, the exercises, the action plans, they're all designed to dismantle the very foundation of self-reliance that so many leaders, they build their entire careers on. Our mission here is really to pull out the most actionable, the most powerful pieces that can help you transform how you understand power and purpose in your own work.
And the central idea here, it's immediately provocative. The sources basically ask you to consider this. What if the greatest barrier to your next level of leadership? What if it isn't a lack of skill or capital or market opportunity?
Right.
What if it's simply an unwillingness to surrender control? And that just moves the whole problem, doesn't it? It goes from being external to something deeply internal.
It forces an immediate audit of yourself. It really does. The resources, they compel you to look at where your independence might be, and I love this phrase, masquerading as strength.
Oh, that's good.
Think about it. We reward independence, but this material suggests our impulse to control is almost always driven by some hidden fear. So to start, you're asked to do this kind of control audit.
Okay, so what does that look like?
You list the areas where you cling the hardest, your budget, your team's project plan, your own calendar, and then you have to identify the specific fear that's driving it. Fear of irrelevance, fear of failure, fear of chaos. It gets right to the heart of it.
Okay, so let's unpack that, this paradox. If yielding is the key, how does that possibly translate into effective leadership in the real world?
Well, the material frames surrender as the essential doorway to true authority. Yeah. It asks you what locked doors are still there in your leadership simply because your own pride is holding the key. And what's fascinating is how it clarifies the operational shift. This isn't just a mindset thing. It fundamentally changes how you make decisions. We're all trained to ask, okay, what's my best option here based on the data?
Right.
That's all human logic.
Standard operating procedure.
Exactly. This framework challenges you to recenter the whole process and start by asking, what is God's instruction?
Whoa, that is a massive redirection of the whole decision-making compass. But, I mean, let's be practical. In a really high-pressure environment, how do you move from analyzing options to seeking divine instruction without, just grinding to a halt?
And that's the tension it addresses directly. It doesn't say abandon strategy. It says reorder the inputs.
Reorder the inputs.
To make it practical, the sources lay out the surrender cycle for refinement. It goes, trust leads to obey, which leads to depend, which is what ultimately allows you to lead. It's a system.
So you're swapping human reasoning as the starting point for trust as the starting point.
Precisely. And they even give you a tool to measure it called the divine guidance audit. This is where the rubber meets the road.
Audit, okay.
You take a recent high-stakes decision, a big hire, a budget cut, and you have to honestly assess how much of that process was driven by prayer versus, market pressure, anxiety, or just your own logic.
So you basically get a score for how much you're actually applying your faith. How do you integrate that? How do you use that finding right now?
The application part recommends you immediately start a God-first decision experiment. For the next 3 days, you take one big decision, and you commit to starting it with, say, 5 or 10 minutes of silence and prayer instead of just jumping into the data. That intentional pause, that's where surrender starts to become a habit.
That pause makes a lot of sense. Okay, let's shift from the external decisions to the internal foundation. Section 2 here goes deep on identity. The material really stresses that leaders have to lead from who you are, not what you want to be. And they pose this really challenging question. If your job, your title, your influence, if it all got stripped away today, would your leadership identity stay intact? Or would it just collapse?
It's a devastatingly effective mirror, isn't it? It forces you to do an identity audit.
Identity audit.
Yeah, to figure out where your confidence is actually coming from. Is it your competence, your position, or is it this deeper foundation of purpose? Because if you're leading from your title, well, when that title goes away, and it always does eventually, your entire foundation just crumbles.
Right.
So we're forced to scrutinize those, those subtle motives. Making this decision for approval, out of fear, for recognition. And you see how those things are always competing with your real purpose.
And at the heart of all this internal work is humility. The sources are, they're totally uncompromising here. They say humility, not your talent, is your greatest strength. I have to push back a little on this. In a hyper-competitive business world, if I embrace radical humility, am I not just inviting people to walk all over me and my organization? How do you reconcile that power with what sounds a lot like passivity?
That's the critical misunderstanding, and the framework tackles it head on.
Hmm.
Humility here isn't passivity, not at all. It's clarity. Clarity about where the power is actually coming from.
Okay.
It's presented as the catalyst for divine empowerment because it moves you away from relying on your own, finite effort. And to find the barriers to that clarity, they offer the pride detection exercise.
And what does that ask specifically?
It asks really pointed questions about your day-to-day, like, when do you feel that urgent gut level need to be right, even if it's about something small? When do you struggle to give credit away? When do you instinctively protect your own image? Those are the red flags.
Those are sharp, very diagnostic. But okay, once I spot those pride triggers in myself, how do I actually build a defense against them?
You build a counter habit immediately. You use that self-awareness to pinpoint a specific trigger. Say you have to jump in and correct every little point in the meeting, and then you create a disciplined counter habit.
Like what?
It could be just a physical pause, or you force yourself to ask for feedback before you speak, or even just a silent prayer. That's the humility lens test in action. It's about translating that introspection into an immediate behavioral change so that pride trigger doesn't become a bad decision.
Okay, so if we've covered the internal work, how do we then connect surrender to, strategy and execution?
Right.
Section 3 gets into that. Chapter 4 is about trusting purpose over pure logic. It challenges you to look at past decisions that were just total self-reliance and see what patterns they reveal about your own trust levels.
And that analysis leads right to this powerful tool called the decision trust matrix. This is where the spiritual stuff becomes quantifiable.
How did that matrix work?
You list 10 recent critical decisions. Then you categorize them by the level of trust you showed. High, moderate, low, or no trust in divine guidance. It gives you this stark visual map of where your reliance patterns actually are. It shows you exactly where surrender is hardest, and it's often in the areas where we feel the most competent.
That makes a very abstract concept visible. But knowing where you don't trust, that doesn't automatically fix it. Chapter 5 moves on to the action part. Obedience.
And this is where so many leaders get stuck. The framework suggests that many of us are just waiting for more clarity, for more certainty, when actually God is waiting for our obedience to the instructions we've already been given.
So obedience has to be the starting point, not the last resort when everything else fails.
Exactly. The delay itself is a form of resistance, a subtle, prideful one.
So how do the materials track that resistance? How do they expose it?
Through something called the obedience tracker. For 7 days, you track those divine promptings, those quiet instructions, and you log your response. Did you obey immediately? Did you delay? Or did you just ignore it?
And that data feeds into what?
It feeds the obedience gap analysis. It forces you to identify the story you tell yourself to justify the delay. Oh, it wasn't practical. The timing was wrong. I didn't have the resources. Uncovering that narrative reveals the real root of your hesitation.
That is relentless accountability, which I guess is what a high performer needs.
Right.
And then the material brings us all the way down to your daily to-do list, right? It's not just about these huge strategic shifts.
Yes, exactly. Moving it from theory into your task manager. The actionable to-do list exercises give you these practical ways to integrate it, like adding a surrender check for each weekly task. Before you mark it done, you just ask, did I do this on my own strength, or was it aligned with purpose?
And I remember another metric they had for daily priorities.
The God alignment score.
Right.
For your daily tasks, you assign a score from 1 to 5 based on how aligned it is with God's purpose, not just with your personal ambition or, what feels urgent. It completely shifts how you prioritize.
Okay, let's move to the external impact, section 4. The leadership ripple. Chapter 9 hits this hard. What patterns in your own leadership surrender or self-reliance are replicating themselves in the people you influence, for better or for worse?
Because your internal posture never just stays internal. It always leaks out.
It always does.
Which is why the discussion then shifts very heavily toward tangible servant leadership. You're asked to identify the hidden expectations you place on your people. Those unspoken demands for loyalty or performance that kind of poison the well of service. True servant leadership requires a real, intentional servant action plan.
So how does the framework make sure that service is proactive and not just, putting out fires?
Through the team needs map. It's a really practical tool. You list your core team members and then identify their top needs. And not just professional ones, but emotional or spiritual needs too. This holds you accountable for intentionally meeting one identified need for each person every single week.
And finally, longevity. This can't just be a one-time spiritual retreat. It has to become the new default.
Absolutely.
Chapter 10 is about creating sustainable, non-negotiable practices to make sure you finish the journey surrendered, not self-directed, which is a huge fear for leaders under constant pressure.
And the materials provide a very concrete framework for it, the 30-day surrender plan exercise. It asks you to establish 3 daily habits, 2 weekly actions, and 1 monthly check-in across your spiritual, professional, and personal life.
So it's systematic.
It's very systematic, it strengthens that surrender muscle, and just as importantly, it helps you recognize the early quiet signs of spiritual drift, that subtle, slow slide back toward self-reliance.
So we've covered the paradox of control, the need to solidify your identity, obedience as an action, and the discipline it takes for long-term impact. It really is a complete system for rebuilding a leadership foundation.
It is. And as a final check, the framework has leaders perform a vision alignment test. It's a crucial gut check to see if your vision for the future actually requires faith, if it serves others, and if it aligns with your purpose, or if it's just clouded by ego.
So what does this all mean for someone listening right now, making decisions tomorrow morning? The sources leave us with this ultimate question of legacy. When your leadership story is finally told, will it be about someone who controlled their way through life, or someone who surrendered their way into a purpose that was far bigger than themselves?
That really is the decision point. But to give you one final provocative thought to take with you from all this, consider this. Which long-held, tightly gripped personal dream that you have might actually be the very thing keeping you from the assignment God truly wants to entrust to you? Perhaps the thing you're holding on to the tightest, the thing you think defines you. Maybe that's what's preventing the next greater surrendered step in your journey.